Hi and welcome to our program. Today we are visiting the exhibition Speeches of the World, organized by the Festival of the Century. Let's check it out. Hi!
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. How are you doing?
Well, fine.
Good.
It's good weather.
Yes, so good today. So what is this exhibition about?
It's an exhibition about speeches who changed the world, and the idea is to present some of the main speeches who have made what can we say, big speeches about environment, or about democracy, about equality, and their words have had an impact on us all.
Yeah, that kind of changed history. Yeah, such a cool theme. And this is part of a festival, right?
Yes. Folkeuniversitetet i Aarhus.
It's like the Festival of the Century?
What's the name? The popular university of Aarhus. Yes. A part of Aarhus University, who every year make this festival of the century. And this year the topic is revolution. So it's part of a festival with a topic named revolution, and here is the speech.
Yes.
The revolution of the words.
Yes. And why are words so important? How can words be so powerful?
Well, if we didn't talk together, then how could we move each other? Words have always been very moving, have had the power to move. The oldest example is Cicero, an ancient Roman 2,000 years ago, who was famous and is famous still today for his ability to move people and make them do what he wanted. He was a kind of a manipulator.
Okay, and you can only do
that.
But
he was a great speaker.
Okay. Okay, then maybe we can start going around. Let's show us.
Let us do it.
Good. So which one is the first speech?
Oh, the first we see here, it's Nelson Mandela. Of course, Nelson Mandela is represented here because I really don't think he was a great speaker in the same way than, for example, Obama, who could make these module words and change. This man, he had not a very good voice, but he was very convincing because he talked about equality in South Africa, and that was his own heart he used here. And I think it was the convincing part of the way he spoke. It was very important for him to make these messages and deliver them for us, and we thought he was genuine when he did it. So I think he in his own way he was a great speaker. Okay. And the quotation here is from his defendants in 1964 when he was sentenced. He was sentenced for lifetime. Actually, he sat in 28 years in prison, and he said something about, I have devoted myself to the ideal of a democratic and free society where all people can live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. So basically, and for these words, he had to sit in jail in 28 years.
And this was his main message, right?
Yes, it was it was the end of the speech, and it was the conclusion of the speech. Actually, the speech was 3 hours, I think.
3 hours? Yeah. Damn. And how can actually people sit and listen to someone for 3 hours and not like how can you?
I have not any idea.
I'm amazed.
It's very amazing. But we have seen it during history many times that great speakers can speak 3, 4, perhaps even 6 hours, and the audience will listen. The audience will stay and listen. So I think it's also something that shows the power of the word.
Yeah. Definitely. And you also mentioned that he didn't have
He didn't
really
have a
strong
good voice. No, it's a not a strong voice.
Okay.
And
that also plays a part.
He was not good at these he was not a great orator in this respect that he could
like everybody
make
here?
very cool sentences
okay.
again and again and again. But he believed in what he said, and you were not in doubt. He believed in what he said, and therefore he was, in his own way, a great speaker.
Okay.
Some of the others are great speakers in this respect that you are impressed. They are powerful. They use their body, and their voices are very strong, and it's very artful what they say. He was not a very artful man, but he was a very convincing man.
Okay. So there's basically no formula for a great
I don't
speech.
think. Of course, we have rhetorics, and we can study how to do that and this.
Yeah.
But you always must take must consider that there's a special condition they're talking into, and their own personality perhaps is the most important thing. If they believe in what they say, you have a tendency to believe that they're good speeches.
Yeah. My God, so interesting. I'm curious, like, about this one thing. You mentioned that great speakers can actually speak for a really long time, and you mentioned 6 hours. Is there any name
Fidel
or
Castro.
something?
He
6 hours. He had
made speeches for up to 8 hours.
8 hours.
Yeah, and people
How is
cheered.
this possible?
Oh, Fidel Castro! They shouted.
Yeah.
I think it's because they have the power to do it. Their words are convincing for the people who listen to it, and again, I think it's because they believe it in themselves. Fidel Castro believed he was a good speaker, therefore he was a good speaker. Oh well, that was maybe an exaggeration.
Yeah. Yeah.
But 8 hours.
Yeah, that was like
Without
do
a
they
break.
usually in big speeches, do they kind of repeat the same things
Yes,
with a
they
different,
do.
or
Yes,
is it
they
new?
do. They repeat. They come to the topic in the different from different canals,
Okay.
and also they repeat certain words. We want hope. We want hope. It's Obama.
Yeah.
For example, he's a very great speaker, but in another way than Mandela. Obama is very. I think Mandela was very natural, and I really like Obama as a speaker, but he has studied this speech very carefully, and then he can, as an actor, tell his speech.
Yeah. So you kind of feel like he's more like prepared, like he really prepared for that, and Mandela didn't. It's more like
But of course he was prepared if he had to defend himself for 3 hours.
Of course. Damn.
Yeah.
3 hours. Amazing. Yeah. So cool.
Yeah.
Shall we go to the next one? Malcolm X.
We have Malcolm X, one of the great African Americans from the 1950s and 1960s. He was a bit of a rival of Martin Luther King, but then again he was also near with Martin Luther King. He was more, for a long time he had a more he promoted a strategy which included violence, and for a long time Martin Luther King promoted a strategy including non-violence. But in fact I think they were nearer each other than you should believe. And Malcolm X was murdered in 1965. He was shot.
And what does this?
The quotation says,
What?
"We used to live in each other's light. Light creates understanding. Understanding creates love. Love creates patience, and patience unites." So you can say this is not a violent message. This is a non-violent message, and in fact, I think he developed his strategy as the years went by in the direction of non-violence.
In the direction of non-violence?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, he started a little bit more aggressive and then calmed down a little bit.
Yes, and on the other hand, Martin Luther King, his rival, developed his non-violent strategy against a more a certain openness for violence. So, well, they were near.
Interesting. And do you think that nowadays these same speakers would have the same impact? Do you still think that? Do you think that speeches still have the same impact nowadays?
I think we have speeches also nowadays who have a great impact, if that's what you mean. The Ukrainian president.
Yeah.
I think he's a great speaker in his own way. On these conditions that he live under just now. I think he's doing it very well also as a speaker. But I think a man like him, if he lived today, perhaps you could recognize him as a great speaker also today, because he was a very good speaker.
This is a bit unrelated, but I would also like to ask your opinion about Donald Trump's speeches. Do you have it? Like, did you follow?
In a classical way, he's not a good speaker, but
then how
he
can
he grip his audience?
How?
Because I think Donald Trump is turning the rules around, and in his own bizarre way. He can make good speeches, but only to his this audience, as to his audience. You cannot imagine a speaker who can catch all, and Donald Trump who knows who he can catch.
Yeah. Okay. So, like in general,
he says, "I am anti-elite," or "I talk anti-elitist language," and I think he's doing it very well.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So which one do you think that it's more effective, let's say, like one targeted speech, like for this specific audience that they know that they can convince, or like a more broad one that you're trying to get a...
Depends on what you want.
Okay.
The situation is decisive. So I don't think I can say the one is the better.
They're different.
Yeah, it depends.
Okay.
What do you want with your speeches?
Okay. Okay.
So, do you want to convince someone who is in doubt, or do you want to convince those who are already convinced? And the last one is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He doesn't speak to me. He speaks to his core audience, and they love it.
Yeah.
But we're
clearly
all we others, well.
Yeah, and it's also so interesting how this thing that you just mentioned, it really works for some people, and they're like, you can see from his rallies and everything, like people go wild, and then other people like, yeah, this is bull.
But if you compare with Nelson Mandela in the early years, before he became a president, the speech he made here was very convincing. It was very difficult for the jury to convict Nelson Mandela, because this speech went all over the world, and people who had never heard about Mandela, or who didn't mind apartheid that much, were moved.
Yeah.
And then he had a much broader audience, and he was able to, if not convince, then create doubt in people. Also in South Africans, white South Africans. He was a very difficult man for the apartheid.
Yeah. So interesting how people can just... My God. It's cool. Should we move to the next one?
Yeah. Pope Francis is focused in fighting inequality, and I think it's great strength that the way he is doing it. And I think he's making a lot of good speeches. And of course he's restrained from what he can say as the head of the Catholic Church, but I think he's doing. Yes, he's doing it as good as he can. I think it's quite a good speaker, and his message comes out.
Definitely, he's been really talked about. Let's say.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what was it, but it was something about LGBT rights that he usually is very like we welcome everybody during his speeches, but then there was something from the Vatican that was it a statement? I don't really remember, or something about how LGBT, like for instance, LGBT couples would not be accepted in church, and he actually signed that, like he was so. What is happening?
He's
do you
always
have an
balancing,
opinion?
because in the LGBT case, he has made some speeches where he's saying that God loves every man and every woman and every all people.
Exactly.
And how could we be the condemning part if God loves all people? And it's a very strong message if you talk to a Catholic audience. So I think it's very strong, but of course he cannot say, I think of course, as the church is today, he cannot say, yes, we are opening for marriage between gays. And he has not said that. But he has gone to the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He's pushing the borders. And that's what he's doing also in the case of inequality, his core case. Whenever he can, he's pointing out that inequality is not, should not be a Christian case. I think it's very brave done.
Yeah, definitely. Like he was very criticized at the beginning because he was so open about these things.
Yeah.
He really changed the Pope image, let's say, from my opinion. Yeah. And what does the quote say?
He says human rights are not only violated by terrorism, by oppression and by murder, but also of unfair economic structures, which are creating great inequality. He is targeting capitalism here, and he's doing it plenty of times. I think it's very brave done of him.
So this is his general message also, inequality and against capitalism.
And he has chosen his Pope name Francis, from Francis of Assisi, the poor's saint.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Well, but he has.
Yeah, learning every day. Yeah, it's so cool. Would you like to add something else about this speech?
Just that I really like the Pope.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, he really is, well, different.
Yeah.
So what about this one?
We have Anwar Sadat, president of Egypt, until he was murdered. Very bloody murder from when TV filmed. But he was known as the man who brought peace between Israel and Egypt after a very long period of a war between the two countries. At last, Sadat came and proposed that they made a peace. And I think precisely that was a very brave and very fine move. And the speech he made in the Israel Parliament Knesset was very famous because of these words. The first truth, no one can build his own happiness on others' unhappiness. And I think this speech and this quote, well, it's the whole worth.
Yeah, well, if it ended a conflict,
yeah,
it was quite powerful.
And he was very criticized to make a peace because, of course, it was difficult to make peace in the Middle East with Israel as a spokesman for the Arab states. So it was very brave to do it. I don't think if it was right, but if it was brave, and I really like this quote.
I forgot what I was going to ask. How long after this speech was he murdered? Was it related to this, or?
Yes, in a way it was related because it was a very sore thing, this relationship with Israel. He was murdered 6 years after by some of his own soldiers, Islamic fundamentalists. And they murdered him during a parade.
Okay.
And it was shown in TV directly.
And was it related then because he ended the war? Like the conflict?
Yes, it was part of this.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sad.
Yeah.
What else? Anything else?
But then he was a hard man.
Yeah,
Well,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Okay, so next one. This one?
Oh, Kali Suzuki.
Ah, this one is more recent.
Yeah. Seven Kali Suzuki. She was what could I say, a proto-Greta Thunberg. She was only 12 years old when she made a speech
Really?
at the UN conference in 1992, and she talked as one of the first about environment.
Wow.
And her message was that she belonged to the first generation who had to grow up with a fear of climate change. And what do you do, she asked the elder. And she was very famous for this, but you could also say she was forgotten for a long time because she was so early.
Yeah.
Yeah.
12 years old.
Yeah, and 1992 no one talked about climate change.
Yeah, exactly.
Nearly no one.
How can a 12-year-old have that
That
perception?
power, I don't know. It was a very, very, very secure speech she made.
Wow.
She's very good.
Yeah. And where is she from?
She's Canadian, and I don't remember which of the indigenous people she belongs to, but indigenous.
Okay. Wow. Then maybe that's the reason why she was so aware of it.
Perhaps. Might be.
Wow.
Today
So
she's
interesting.
has come she's famous again because of Greta Thunberg. And then
Like people
she's
compare
remembered
them.
too, but she's a forerunner.
Okay. And did she have any other like major appearances after that big speech when she was
No.
12? It was
No.
that one and only.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And she said, if you don't know how you can repair it, please don't spoil it. And
Yeah.
it is, of course, the environment. So, very strong message and very, very a good formulation.
Yeah, very simple and
Simple,
straightforward.
Yes. Yes.
To the point.
Yes. And her speech was only a 5-minute speech,
Okay.
not 6 hours.
Yeah. Well, sometimes 5 minutes it's what you need to
Yeah,
make your
yeah,
point.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you have any idea like how she got to have the speech at the UN? Because
No,
she
I'm not
was
sure.
not really
She
known?
and two other teenagers went to Rio and
Okay.
made that speech, and they had difficulties to make this speech because they weren't members of the audience, and but they were permitted, and I don't know why.
Okay. I also wanted to. And was there? What were the reactions to the speech? Like, was there any? I wouldn't use the word change, but did people start to talk about it a little bit more? Was it a topic like?
Immediately, the speech made a great impact on the audience. You can see that from the television, from this time. But time was very early to talk about climate change, and someone has to be the first. So you can say 1992. She was at least 10 or 15 years too early to become a great star. But then again, someone has to be the first
one. Exactly. Most of the names that we remember were not the first ones that attempted to do something. It was just the right time.
No.
And
But
the
in
right
fact,
thing.
there was at least one before Suzuki who talked
another
about
one.
environment. And we have him here.
Ooh, that was a nice transition.
Yeah, Indira Gandhi.
Yeah.
The Prime Minister of India for long periods since 1965 and until she was murdered in 1985, I think.
That was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. We hope you enjoyed the programs. See you next time.
Ungdomsradio. 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 Ungdomsradio.